Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have invited Elizabeth Long and Mary McDonald, immigration lawyers from the law firm of Long Mangalji, to present on the following topics: when you can work legally when you're studying, how to apply for your postgraduate work permit, avenues for obtaining permanent residence, and what to do if your application has been denied. And so I won't take too long with the introduction. I'll pass it on to Elizabeth and Mary. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Hussam. It's wonderful to be here as always. So just some housekeeping. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box, and we will spend some time at the end of the presentation trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. This is recorded, and we will be sending you the slides and recording shortly afterwards as well. Okay? All right, let's get started here. Okay, so, we wanted to have a chat with you, and it's always been important for us to meet with you and talk with you about immigration law. But now more than ever, we are seeing there have been a lot of changes in the immigration system, particularly because the government, last year there was 900,000 international students and 700,000 workers who have work permits. And these days, the government right now is only allowing around 110,000 immigrate under the express entry this year, for example. So there's a lot of questions about this. So we're going to be addressing some of your questions about permanent residence later on. But before we get there, we want to talk about temporary residence and make sure that whatever you do while you have your study permit and while you have your work permit, you are doing it legally and you are able to maintain your status, okay? So the first part is studying and working on your study permit. What must you do to keep your student status? So, just because your study permit expires maybe 2 years, 1 year, 3 years down the road, it doesn't mean that you won't lose your status before your study permit ends, okay? It's very important that you understand that in order to keep your status, you have to actively pursue your studies. Otherwise, you will lose your status after 90 days. There are two exceptions to the rule. One is if it's a scheduled break. So your school has that, on the academic calendar. Everybody in the program has that break. Summer breaks, spring breaks, whatever breaks. Okay, and so in those situations, you're fine. You're still considered actively pursuing studies. The other one is called authorized leave. Authorized leave is a personal situation where, let's say, something happens in your life and you just can't, you just aren't able to attend school full time, for example. Let's say sometimes, I have someone who comes to me and say, you know what, this term is really difficult because maybe they have some health issues or their family has some financial issues and they just can't attend school that semester. Well, what you need to do is you need to go to the school and ask for an authorized leave for 1 semester, okay? When you go on authorized leave, you are not enrolled as a full-time student, but because you have that leave from the school, you can take off up to a semester, 150 days, without applying for another study permit, because that authorized leave for up to only 150 days is counted as actively pursuing studies if you get the permission from the school ahead of time. So working while you are studying, you can only work while you are a full-time student. If you are a part-time student, you cannot work, okay? If you're on authorized leave, you are not enrolled as a full-time student, so you cannot work at all, okay? Once you've completed your studies as well, as soon as you get the first notification that you've completed your studies, you are not a student anymore and you have to stop working then. The only exception to that rule is if you've graduated from one program and you have been accepted into another program. And that new program is going to start in less than 150 days. Then that semester in between those programs, you are allowed to work then.
Okay, so another very important thing to understand is to always make sure that you maintain your status while you're here in Canada. So the first thing that you need to do right now is pull out your study permit and look at the date that's listed as the expiry date. Write it down on your calendar and pay close attention to this date. If your study permit is going to expire before your program ends, then you need to apply to extend your permit before that expiry date. And another key thing to understand is implied status. So when you submit an extension application, as long as you submit it properly and before the end date, the expiry date that's listed on your study permit, you'll hold what's called implied or maintained status while you're waiting for a decision on that application. And that allows you to continue studying in Canada while you're waiting for IRCC to actually process that extension application and give you a decision. If you have implied status, it does require you to be in Canada while you wait for a decision on the new application. Otherwise, if you do leave Canada, then your implied status will end. And now let's say you wake up and you realize, oops, I missed the expiry date on my study permit. Well, you might still be in what's called the restoration period. So from the expiry date on your permit, you have 90 days to apply to restore your status. So if you've lost your status, you can apply to get your status back by submitting a restoration application. It's really, really important to keep the timing in mind here because the deadlines are very, very strict. You have 90 days from when you lose your status to apply for restoration. And if you've passed the expiry on your study permit, or if you've applied for an extension and it was refused, keep in mind that you have that 90-day period to restore your status. So if your study permit expires, you have 90 days from the date that's listed on your permit. And if you apply for an extension and it gets refused, you have 90 days from the date on that refusal letter to submit an application for restoration.
So, one of the things that we find gets very confusing is, for example, if you are going to apply for a postgrad work permit when you graduate and you apply inside Canada, you'll get this letter called and it says WPEXT, Work Permit Extension Letter. It's supposed to be something that helps you. You can show it to your employer to show that you can work while you're waiting for the decision, and you can get OHIP as well extended. Actually, I'm not sure if you already have OHIP, then you can get OHIP extended and as well. The problem with this letter is that there is a random date that is set by the government on this letter, and it makes it seem almost like you will lose your status if your work permit hasn't been issued by that date. That is very, very misleading because that's not true. You have the legal right to continue to work and you have your implied status until a decision is made, okay? If you guys go on our social media, we actually have a video where I explain this on our social media, so check that out. And also the other thing about restoration, difference between restoration and implied status is if you've lost your status, when you're going to apply again, you can stay in Canada while waiting for the restoration, but you cannot study, you cannot work, you don't actually have implied status. If you applied before your status ended, you can continue to study or work depending on what you had before and what you're applying. But if you're on restoration, you have to stop studying, you have to stop working. So make sure that you have it on your calendar when your study permit expires, so that you make sure that you apply before your status ends. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the post-grad work permit. Now, the post-grad work permit, more than ever, becomes very important to your ability to apply for permanent residence, because it is something where you can get quite easily when you graduate, and you can work for anyone. It's an open work permit, and so it's much easier to find a job with a post-grad work permit than if you had to go to an employer and ask for a LMIA. Okay. But the length of the post-grad work permit, especially now when the points are so high for express entry, is very important. Many of you, if you don't have at least 1 year of work experience, sometimes you'll need 2 or 3 years of work experience, you may not be able to immigrate. And if you just graduated from a 1-year program, you get how long for your post-grad work permit? You get a 1-year post-grad work permit. That in and of itself, for many people, may not be enough. So if you did a 1-year program and then you did another 1-year program, or if you do a 2-year program or more, you'll get a 3-year post-grad work permit. Okay. Now, in the last few years, there were some temporary programs which allowed students on post-grad work permits to extend their work permit. The government has already announced that that's not going to happen anymore. Don't expect that. It's the normal rules that apply. 2-year program, you get a 3-year work permit. 1-year program, you get a 1-year work permit. Unless you have a master's, then you get a 3-year work permit. Okay. Very important as well, distance education now. Okay, before, during COVID, there was some relaxation of the rules. Now, distance education, for the most part, if it's 50% or more of your program, then you're not going to be qualified for the post-grad work permit. So be very careful about studying online. And lastly, maintaining your status, full-time status at school. It's very important. If you have a part-time semester, except in the last semester, then you are not going to be eligible for the post-grad work permit. Sometimes people say to me, Elizabeth, I just can't do a full-time this semester. What I might suggest is to take off the entire semester and ask for authorized leave from the school. If you ask for authorized leave from the school and take the whole semester off, then you're okay for the post-grad work permit. But if you just go part-time, that could basically disqualify you from the post-grad work permit. You'll have to do another study program in order to get the post-grad work permit. Also, sometimes people say, oh, you know what, I'm going to fail, so I'm going to just drop the course so I don't have it showing on my transcript. That is also bad for the post-grad. If you drop more courses so that in the end, it only shows on the transcript that you had enough courses to be a part-time student, then the officer goes by that. And you're a part-time student, you don't get the post-grad work permit. Even if you fail, but you went all the way and you wrote the exam, and even if you failed, at least you can show that you're registered for all of the courses of a full-time student, then you're okay. It's in the last semester, if you only needed to do make up 1 or 2 courses and you're a part-time student, that's okay, but only in the last semester. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about when you can work and when you need to apply for the post-grad work. Okay, so on the IRCC website, it says that you can apply for a post-grad work permit within 180 days of you completing your program. But I'm here to tell you, don't go by that deadline, because if you go by that deadline, your post-grad work permit could very well fail if you didn't file a restoration of status for your study permit. because you are supposed to have valid study permit and valid student status while you're applying for the postgrad work permit. So what I tell you as the deadline to keep in mind is apply within 90 days of the completion of your program, or when your study permit expires, whichever comes first. If you do that, then you can start working while you're waiting for your postgrad work permit to be issued. Right now, sometimes the postgrad work permit takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months to it be issued, and you want to be able to work while waiting for that work permit. Okay. So just wanted to go through a timeline for you as to when you should be up, when you can work near the, because I know there's a lot of confusion about that. So first of all, if you're writing your final exams, you're still a full-time student, you can work. If you're waiting for your results, you can work. Okay, you're a full-time student still. As soon as you get your results back, as soon as the school has notified you that you've completed your program, at that time, you're not a full-time student. You have to stop working then. Now, after you have submitted your postgrad work permit application, and if you do it within that deadline I told you, 90 days, and while your study permit is still valid, then you can start working full-time at that point. All right, let's get to permanent residence now.
So as you look at different PR routes, you're going to find that many of them require you to have what's called high-skilled work experience. So you need to know whether a job that you're going to take is going to be considered high-skilled or low-skilled, so you can make sure that it's going to qualify you for the PR program that you're planning on going through. So what's the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work? IRCC has categorized all of the different jobs into national occupation codes, which are called NOC codes, NOC. The NOC codes are divided into 6 tiers, and tier 0, 1, 2, and 3 are considered high-skilled, whereas tier 4 and 5 are considered low-skilled. So in 2022, this whole system changed, and some jobs that used to be considered low-skilled were changed to high-skilled, like truck drivers, personal support workers, whereas some that were considered high-skilled were changed to be considered low-skilled. And the skill level is really, really, really important to confirm to make sure that you're going to qualify for PR. So sometimes we see people making the mistake of just relying on what their friends did or what they read online. But because these laws do change so much, you really have to have proper advice on what your specific job falls under and whether it's going to work for your selected PR route. And we've listed all of the changes on this slide here, so you'll be able to see what the different changes have been since 2022.
All right. Now I want to talk with you guys about express entry. Most of you guys probably already heard about this system. This system is the most popular system on the economic side to apply for permanent residence, but it's not the only way to do it, okay? I'm going to go through it and and then we'll talk about some of the other ways to do it. All right, so express entry, how does it work? First, you have to create an online profile, and you get to create an online profile if you qualify under one of 3 categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, Federal Skilled Trades. If you qualify, you get to enter the express entry pool. Very importantly, when you enter the express entry pool, have you applied for permanent residence? No, you have not applied for permanent residence, okay? When you enter the express entry pool, you have just created a profile. You have told the government that you would like to apply, and the system gives you a series of points based on your background and if you have provincial nomination. Okay, and the provincial nomination is express entry linked provincial nomination. Not every provincial nomination gives you 600 points. Now, once you're in the pool, you get those points, and the government then has a draw, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe sometimes one or week, or sometimes 3 weeks. It depends, okay? But usually around every 2 weeks, the government may have a draw where they select people and they issue invitations to apply. Now, in the past, most of this has been based on your actual score, and there are still draws for actual scores, but there are now more things like category-based draws. Sometimes they might invite people under different ways that you enter the pool. Okay, so you can only apply for permanent residence once you've received the invitation to apply. So it's not just, creating a profile. That's not you're not even nearly halfway yet by creating a profile. By creating a profile, you have just shown that your interest and your ability to enter the pool. It's actually, you have to see if you can get an invitation to apply. All right, so let's talk first about entry into the pool. To qualify, there are different programs. The first program is called the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Many of you may already be able to enter into the pool. If you have 1 year of high skilled work experience that is in one occupation, it's full-time and it's continuous for 1 year. Okay. Other than that, you can be self-employed. You can have this work experience while you're studying, while you're outside. The language, then we look at your language scores and your other federal skilled worker points. It's not the same as express entry points. Federal skilled worker points, you have to meet the minimum score. Okay. Notice that this work experience can be for self-employed work, and it can be for work that you do while you are studying. It's very different from the second category, where the work experience is very specific. In the Canadian experience class, the work experience has to be at least 1 year of full-time work, which is at least 30 hours a week. It could be in different occupations that are high skilled. It has to be in Canada. The work experience has to be gained while you are not a full-time student. And very importantly, you have to be an employee of the company. Employee of the company means you receive a T4 from your company, and you do not control a significant amount of the company. So you can't just create a company and hire yourself, for example. Okay. The third one, not going to go into too much because it's not that used. It's not really applicable, but it's for people in the trades. If you have an LMIA or a provincial certification for the construction trades, for example, you could enter into the pool that way. So once you have your ability to enter the pool, what kind of factors would give you points to be selected out of the pool? The first one is age. Basically, when you start turning 30, your points start dropping. And in your 30s, it's -5, -6 every birthday. 40s, it's -10, -11. And by the time you're 45, the good news is your points don't drop anymore. And that's because the bad news is your points are 0. Compare that to someone in the 20s whose points are at 100, 110 points. It could be a significant difference. There's not a lot you can do about age except apply as early as possible. Education, if you have 2 programs where one program is 3 years or more, and one of those programs could be outside of Canada, if you already have a bachelor's, that counts. That really makes your points jump. Language scores are very important. Especially if you don't have 1 year of work experience, we're really looking at language scores of the CLB 9 or above. Relevant Canadian work experience. And that's the work experience that I described for the Canadian experience class. The 1 year of high skilled work experience when you're not a full-time student in Canada, when you are employed. Foreign work experience is high skilled work experience that you've obtained outside of Canada. That can be important. Your spouse. So depending on your spouse's background, whether or not they have their education, language, Canadian work experience, if they're super spouse, they may add to your points. If not, they could take away from your points. Provincial nominee programs. So we're going to talk about that, but it's not every provincial nominee program that will give you 600 points. If you have been selected for a provincial nominee program that is express entry linked and you receive the provincial nomination, then you can get 600 points added to your score. Previous study in Canada is important. If you've been able to study at Mohawk and then you can get 15 points. Arranged employment, 15 points for 1 to 2 years, 30 points for 3 years of a 3-year program at Mohawk. Arranged employment, this becomes quite important for those people who have jobs, and you can't get arranged employment just on a post-grad work permit because it's an open work permit. If you are able to get a LMIA, or if you're able to get an employer-specific work permit. So there are work permits that are not LMIA-based, but employer-specific. Some of those could be if you are from countries that have free trade agreements and you apply under a professional, like a free trade professional work permit. Some countries like Mexico, Peru, Colombia, US, what else? EU, EU, the UK, so many different kinds of countries, and you have a job offer that meets the professional requirements. For example, if you're an engineer from Mexico, for example, we can apply for a work permit that does not require LMIA. We just register the job and you can get a work permit. Those would qualify for arranged employment if you worked for the company for a year. Okay. Siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, they will give you 15 points. Fluency of French, that is important. And trade certification as well. Trade certification, it's really relevant to the construction trades. So that's the system. And those are the points for the express entry. Now, some of you, when you take a look at this, it may be good. Right now, though, because we have so many people who are trying to apply, we have so many students, so many workers, the points are just crazy high, higher than they have ever been, in the mid 500s. And they may be going down. I'm hopeful they will go down later on this year, but I would anticipate that the points would still stay above 500. And we're going to go through some strategies at the end, what to do if your points are just not meeting that level, okay? One of the things that you can look at is the new category-based draws. One of the reasons the general draw numbers are so high is because the government last summer instituted the new category-based draws, where if they will have certain draws just for people in these categories. So if you have French, for example, they will just invite people who have a certain level for French. And if you have that, then the points for you might be much, much lower, maybe in the 300s compared to other people, because they're only inviting people in that. Healthcare occupations, another thing, 6 months of work experience in the last 3 years in one of these other occupations, STEM occupations, trades, transport. You know, sometimes it's much easier nowadays to get invited as a truck driver, for example, than it could be, you know, to do a work at a bank, for example, because of these category-based draws, agriculture. Okay, so I've included a link here that you can check these out, and this might inform you as to what kind of jobs you might want to look for when you graduate as well.
Okay, so beyond the express entry system, there are also ways to get PR through the provincial nominee programs. So Ontario's provincial nominee program is called the OINP, and there's several different streams under OINP that you might be able to use to get PR. So one of the streams that they have are called these express entry link streams, where you need to be in the express entry pool to receive a nomination through these streams. And if you do get that nomination, it can add 600 extra points to your express entry score, which basically ensures that you're going to get an invitation to apply for PR in the next express entry general draw. Typically, that's the case. So how do they work? So in Ontario, you can't just go and apply directly to these express entry OINP streams. First, you have to be in the express entry pool, and then you wait to receive a notification of interest from Ontario. So you only receive a notification of interest if Ontario is interested in you. You can't directly ask them for a notification of interest through this stream. But if they do give you that notification of interest, then you can submit your application and get 600 extra points added to your CRS score. So who are they going to be giving these notifications of interest out to? There are 3 different categories that they've identified. One is the human capital stream. So for this stream, you do need to have a bachelor's degree or higher. And they've specified that there's certain candidates that they might be interested in. So that can be people that they've prioritized in tech. Sometimes they're interested in people in healthcare, and it can also be a very wide category. So it can even be something like people who have job offers or who have other certain work experience. The next one is French speaking. So this is another one for people who have a bachelor's degree, which can be from inside or outside of Canada. They need to also have a high level of French. So that's a CLB 7 and a CLB 6 in English. So that's for people who are in the express entry pool. With those qualifications, they can receive that notification of interest from Ontario through this stream. And then the last one is targeting people in the skilled trades. So if you're in the express entry pool and you have at least 1 year of work experience in Ontario within the last 2 years in one of the trades that Ontario has specified, then you could receive a notification of interest. You don't need to have a bachelor's degree or anything for this program. As long as you have a work permit and you've been working for 1 year in a skilled trade that Ontario has listed that they're interested in, you could receive a notification of interest through this stream. So next, non-express entry streams. So these are other streams that Ontario has, which are outside of that express entry system, and they're still within the OINP. So these streams have different requirements, and they also have a different application process. So these non-express entry streams use what's called an expression of interest system, or EOI system. If you qualify for one of these programs, you have to register your expression of interest in the OINP portal for the particular program that you qualify for. Once you're in the pool of all the applicants who have registered their expression of interest, you're waiting for Ontario to do a draw for your program and give you a notification of interest. Ontario doesn't announce when they will do their draws beforehand, so it is best to get into the pool for your particular stream as soon as you qualify, because you never know when Ontario will do another draw. If you do get selected, they issue you an invitation to submit your information to receive a nomination certificate. Once your nomination is processed, you can apply for PR through the federal government. So the streams have different points and different requirements than express entry. And some streams, for example, require you to have a PhD or a master's, and then others just require you to have a job offer and meet other certain criteria. So the other thing to note about these programs is that they do allocate points differently than express entry. So for example, things like having a job offer in a Northern Ontario community can give you extra points for these programs. They don't count points for age, which is another benefit for some applicants. And it's good to get a sense of where your points might be to see if they're going to be doing a draw for you. Okay, so next we have an explanation of the employer-based streams.
Mhm.
So this is still within that non-express entry OINP expression of interest category. And so there are some of these streams that require you to have a job offer. So for these streams, you have to meet certain requirements as the applicant, and you also need a job offer from an employer that meets certain requirements. For all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application needs to have been in business in Ontario for 3 years. If they're located inside the GTA, they need to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was over 1 million and that they have at least 5 full-time employees who are Canadian citizens or PRs. If they're outside of the GTA, they have to show that they have 500,000 in income, three full-time Canadian or PR employees. The job offer itself has to be full-time and permanent means no end date on your contract. So there's specific categories within these job offer-based streams. So the first one is the international student stream. So for the international student stream, you need a job offer that meets those requirements that I explained. And you also need to have completed your program of study in Ontario and apply within 2 years of graduation. You have to have graduated from an eligible program. So that means you've either done a 2-year degree or diploma program in Ontario, or as of January of this year, they are also accepting people who have done a 1-year college program that grants an Ontario college graduate certificate. So aside from the qualifying education credential that's been issued to you within the last 2 years, you also need a high-skilled job offer that's full-time and permanent, and you need to be paid what's called the low wage for your occupation according to your location of employment. The next stream is called the skilled worker stream. So for this stream, you need to have a job offer that meets those requirements, and you need to have at least 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. So that work experience doesn't have to have been inside Canada, and it doesn't have to have been inside Ontario. It just has to show that you have those 2 years of experience within the last 5 years. The job offer has to be for a position that's also high skilled, and the salary offered has to be the median wage for your region. There are also no education requirements for the skilled worker stream. And then finally, there's the in-demand job offer stream. So the OINP has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. It's not every occupation, it's a very specific list. And it's one of the only ones that includes low-skilled job offers and positions. So if you, or for example, if your spouse is working in one of these positions that Ontario has specified, then as long as you have at least 9 months of experience in Ontario in that same occupation, and keep in mind this can be with the same employer who's offering you the job or a different employer, and you're making the salary, a salary that's considered median wage for the occupation, then you could qualify for the in-demand stream.
All right. So we have one more program, and sometimes when we're talking about programs, we're not just talking about a program for yourself. Oftentimes, you might have a spouse who you're married to, or even common law. So there's a lot of confusion about what common law is. Common law is someone who you have been living together with in a marriage-like situation, so not just roommates, for example, for at least 1 year. Okay, so if you live with someone for at least 1 year, they are your common law. It's basically the same as being married, and they are your family. And for your spouse, your partner, they're able to get open spousal work permit while you have your study permit right now. I think down the road, the new programs, if they're not doing the masters, they won't be able to get the spousal work permit anymore. But for you, if you're already here, then you're lucky your spouse gets the open work permit. When you graduate, if you have any kind of job, it doesn't have to be high skilled anymore, then your spouse also gets their open work permits. So some of these programs that we're talking about, even if you're studying and you're not working, but your spouse is working, they might qualify for one of these programs earlier. And it doesn't matter who is the principal applicant. If one person gets it, the whole family can get it, okay? So caregiver program is one of the things that we might suggest that you think about. Now, the caregiver program is something where you need to be working for someone in their home, okay? Caring for their children, elderly, or disabled people in their home, not at a nursing home or anything, or a daycare. There are two kinds of programs. There's one kind, and it's just taking care of the children, and the other kind is taking care of elderly or disabled people. Now, if you are going to apply for, there's a quota every year for each program. The one for the children fills up in a matter of minutes. It's often very difficult to get in. It's on January 1st, the program opens, and it's often very difficult to get a spot for the children. But the one for the elderly or disabled, that one, it can take months to fill up for that quota. And so if I had a choice, I'd probably choose taking care of someone who is elderly or disabled over the children one, because the chances are just that much higher. To qualify for permanent residence, you need to have a post-secondary education from anywhere. You need to meet the CLB benchmark of 5, and you have to have that 12 months of work experience in Canada. That's it, okay? And so what happens is this could be a program maybe for yourself or maybe even for your spouse, where if they did this, we can apply for permanent residence. Now, there's a lot of talk these days about, and there's a lot of worry, I think, these days about what to do if your points are just not high enough with the 500 something points. I have to say, for you guys who are still studying, it's good that you guys are still studying. You may have some time for the system to calm down. I think this year is pretty extraordinarily high. Hopefully it'll calm down in the next year or two, but that's just my guess. There's no guarantees for that. So what do you do if your points are so not necessarily going to be that high? What are some of the things that you can keep in mind?
Okay, so the first thing that you should do if you don't have enough points to qualify through express entry or get an invitation is to get some proper advice about how you might be able to raise your points. So this is going to be different for everybody depending on your individual background, your education, your language, everything like that. But some of the common methods are, firstly, one can be increasing your work experience in and outside of Canada. So getting, if possible, another year of high-skilled work experience in Canada, or in some cases, going abroad and getting high-skilled work experience outside of Canada can be a great way to increase your points. Another one is increasing your language scores. So right now, with where express entry scores are at, you really need to be maximizing your language to be competitive. Typically, what we see is you want at least a CLB 9 these days to have a high enough score to get invited, and honestly, even higher than that is better. The next one is increasing your education. So getting further education can be another great way to increase points. It depends on what kind of education you already have to see how big of a difference it's going to make for you to get that further education. And then another one is getting arranged employment. So if you have an employer that is willing to support your PR application and you can get an employer-specific work permit, then it can add 50 points to your CRS score. Another one is getting work experience in the category-based draws. So it can be a good idea to make a plan to get work experience in one of these listed categories to qualify for those category-based draws with the lower CRS score thresholds. Another one would be increasing your French points. So if you can get high scores on a French test, this can add quite a few points to your application and also qualify you through the French draws. So that's a great idea if it's something that you're capable of doing. And then another one would be qualifying under the provincial nominee program. So as we mentioned before, there are express entry linked provincial nominee programs that can add 600 extra points to your score.
So, you know, it's not, express entry is not the end all and be all, okay? Under the economic system, half of the spots, there's over 220,000 spots for the economic stream this year. Half of those are express entry, and the other half are provincial nominee programs and other programs. And so it's not necessarily that if you can't go through express entry, that's the end of the world. There are quite a lot of different alternatives. We can look at provincial nominee programs. We can look at your spouse and see if they can qualify under other programs, the caregiver programs. I didn't have a chance to talk about entrepreneurs. If you're thinking about starting up your own business, there are some ways. It's not a clear way to necessarily, there are different routes to do so. And if you like, you know, we have a YouTube channel, and there are different ways that we talk about to you know, immigrate in different ways. But you know, we'll probably be doing another podcast or another video on entrepreneur routes. There are other programs that are coming out, and sometimes they are specific to certain areas. For example, the Atlantic immigrant programs. There are different ways to immigrate if you have a job in other provinces. And also the government there's the RNIP program, which is a rural and northern immigrant program. There are programs that the government said is going to come out for other rural communities. So sometimes if you're open and flexible to going elsewhere, that might be something, but don't just go and move somewhere and think that you can immigrate just because you're there. A lot of these programs will require that you meet certain criteria, including having a job, okay? And if you already have a job where you are, don't just move out without having proper advice. You could very well have a very good chance of immigrating by staying where you are with your job that you have, okay?
Okay, so another important thing is trying to keep in status. So as we discussed earlier, it's a good idea to try to get your postgrad work permit to be valid for as long as possible. Doing a program that's going to allow you to get a 3-year postgrad work permit is definitely needed for giving you enough time to reach your goals and increase your points to qualify for PR by the end of your postgrad work permit. Another one would be plan on how you might be able to extend your work permit beyond your postgrad work permit. So this could be done through an employer-specific work permit, or certain P&P programs also allow you to extend your work permit. So you want to try to think about ways to find an employer who might be willing to support that if you get to the end of that postgrad work permit and you don't qualify for PR yet. And then finally, team up with your spouse. So keep in mind that your spouse may qualify for programs that you don't qualify for, and vice versa. So assess if they have work experience or can do something like rewrite their language to increase your points to get to a place where you're going to get an invitation to apply.
And finally, plan some more. You know, when someone comes to us, we often have not just a plan A, but plan B and plan C. And then the laws change so fast and so much. The points for express entry, for example, fluctuate. You know, just a couple of years ago, you could have gotten through with in 2021, it was like 300 something. And then So, don't just rely on what other people say or what other people do. There is a lot of fraud in the immigration system. And as the points get higher, the temptation to listen to these people that offer you the easy way out can be very high. But it can be also very detrimental to your future if you do that. Even if you were able to be successful, if you won't be able to really rest easy, because if they catch you in the end, they can take away your permanent residence. They can take away your citizenship. And if they find that you have misrepresented on your application, you will be barred from Canada for 5 years. Okay, so plan to do things right, plan to do things legally, but plan early. It's never too early to plan. I like to talk to people even before they come to Canada and study. It's not too early. Even if you don't qualify for something, it's good to know what you need to do in order to qualify. Okay, so here is our information. We do a lot of posts now on social media. Mary is like one of our stars for, students. She's always telling you guys what to think about, what to do. Check us out on social media. Email us if you would like to book a consultation. And when you book and email us, let us know that you come to a webinar so we can give you the discount. We offer Mohawk students $100 for the discounted consultation fee. Okay. Now, I have done something today, which is I wanted to launch a poll. And if you wouldn't mind just filling out some information for us, that kind of helps us understand what kind of students you are, so that we can kind of tailor our answers to the questions that you guys are posing. That would help us a lot. Okay. Next time, I think I should launch this next time maybe I should launch this at the beginning so we can know. I was just thinking about this while we were doing this, so I just put together this poll while we were talking. Super, you guys are doing it so fast. That's awesome. Awesome. Okay, great. Yep. More people. Excellent. All right. That's awesome. Okay, so yep. Everybody done this? Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. We have quite a lot of people in business, some people in healthcare technician, IT, okay, and a lot of people are in the 2 years, some people in the 3 years, some people in the 1 year. A lot of people are graduating this semester, later next year. Excellent. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, great. Okay, so shall we start with the questions, Mary?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start here. So, okay, so this question there's 4 parts to it. The first one is, can I apply for residency as an international student with a job offer with my current degree and any type of job?
Yeah, that's a very open question. You'll have to come for a consult and we can do a plan for you.
Right. To file papers and obtain the postgrad work permit, I must have financial support. If so, how much? On my account or my parents?
You don't have to have any financial support to file the postgrad work permit. To qualify, you need to have completed your program and some of the other conditions that I set out.
What's the best and fastest option to obtain residency since I want to continue my studies?
Come for a consult, we'll make a plan for that.
And this one's asking, it's about resident prices on university studies.
that you need to contact the universities.
Yeah.
Okay.
This next one looks quite
yeah.
specific as well. Yeah.
So, okay, so
Okay.
it says, for you, Mary, my passport is valid until 2026. My consulate does not allow me to extend it until the end of 2025. If I apply for the 3-year postgrad work permit, will it be a problem?
So it depends a little bit on your specific situation, but generally, if you apply and it only goes to the validity of your passport, then you can always get an extension for the remainder of the time that you were owed for the postgrad work permit. Okay, this next one I think might be a bit too specific to answer here. So I will skip that one for now. So present international students in Canada can now work more than 20 hours a week as of January 2024. How valid is this?
So I think right now they've extended to April of this year that you can work off campus. You can always work full-time on campus, but they've extended to April. I don't know if they'll extend it beyond that. After that, it goes back to regular rules.
Yeah.
All right. So this person has been working as a skilled service technician at, I guess that's sort of like a mechanic. I know mechanics, you guys can find jobs like that. I've been talking with some employers and they're looking for you guys. Does that count as skilled work under the OIMP?
OIMP skilled worker. I don't know if this is referring to the in-demand stream or
No, I think it's the foreign worker stream. Or
okay.
Yeah,
I'm not
sure if it's under the skilled trades, but it's definitely high skilled work. So you could
high skilled work for
under the foreign worker stream.
Yeah, if you have 2 years out of the last 5 years and you can get a job offer from your employer and they can offer you the median wage for your location, then it could work as long as your employer needs to meet the requirements and then you also need to meet the requirements.
Also, if you were to do a 2-year program, you could go through the international student stream as well without any work experience as well. So it just depends on your background. But also, I think you could go under, I have to double check if it's skilled trades as well. If you had worked for 1 year, you might have a special draw for it. So come for a consult and we can look at that. Also, LMIAs might be possible as well. This is a very highly needed job. So yeah, come for a consult, we can figure it out.
Okay. What about if you have just one course retaken for your last semester? Are you allowed to work in that situation?
Yes. So if you, in the last semester, if you are part-time, you can work. That's the only exception for part-time students. Last semester, you can work in the last semester. This person is studying electrical engineer technician. What do you think? Can he be eligible for skilled trades of industrial electrician?
So if you get the work experience that you need for skilled trades, then yes, you can qualify under that program. Applying for PR after graduation, it's a good idea to apply as soon as you do qualify for one of the streams because you don't know when they're going to do an invitation that could include you.
And as to whether or not you qualify under a particular NOC code, we can't just tell by the title of what you do. It's all about the duties and sometimes the education requirements as well. So, you know, when you come, we spend some time figuring out what NOC code, but a lot of it is what you do. You could be called the president, but if all you're doing is cleaning the office, then you're not necessarily the president, okay? And similar, if you could be called a janitor, but if you're running the company, then you are the president. So it really depends on what you actually do and not just what you're called. So come for a consult and we can figure it out.
Okay, can I work with my co-op work permit while I have authorized leave?
You cannot work with your co-op work permit on anything other than your co-op program. Okay, so on the co-op work permit, it usually says, in any case, even if it doesn't say it is for that, it's for work that is related to your education program. So if it is that, even if it's the same employer that you were doing for a co-op and they wanted to hire you after your co-op term ends, you can't work for them just based on the co-op work permit. The authorized leave is when you are no longer enrolled as a student. So you cannot work at all on authorized leave. And I certainly don't think that you're working in your co-op program if you're on authorized leave. Okay, so somebody is repeating the third semester, got into part-time status last time. They will help me. So it sounds like this person had some issues with the part-time status. What do you think that they, yeah.
So normally when you've gone part-time, it is a problem for the post-grad work permit. Sometimes you can try and explain what has happened and ask the officer to use their discretion, but it's really, really dependent on the particular situation and what happened with the part-time studies. And sometimes what can be a good idea is if you've gone part-time or you've had breaks in your studies or your studies have become a little bit complicated, what you can do is take another program and complete that one on a full-time basis with no leaves or anything like that, and then apply for your post-grad work permit based on that second program.
Let us know, come and talk with us and we can see what can be done in your situation. Sometimes, for example, if you were to do a program and you had to make it up for one semester and then you did another extra semester and we got a proper explanation from the school, you might be able to have an officer be sympathetic to your situation. But in general, it's not recommended, but if the situation is what it is, come speak to us and maybe we can help deal with that.
How many times can you apply for a study visa extension?
There is no limit on how many times, but if you apply for example, if you're always constantly failing your studies and you need to apply 3-4 times, the officer may wonder whether or not you are actually studying. So, you know, if it's for good reasons, then you should explain to the officer why it is that you needed to extend your studies. The timing of 1 year work experience, when does it start to count for skilled trades?
For skilled trades, it's once you're no longer a full-time student, I believe. Like it's once you're working on a valid work permit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll have to double check that for the OIMP skilled trades. Well, I'll have to double check that on that. But for the for example, for express entry for work experience in Canada, then it is after you've completed your studies. But when you apply for your postgrad work permit, that time that you're working while on implied status is counted for express entry.
Okay. Can I take a program that has 1 year?
Why not? I don't understand. Why not? It depends on your situation, whether or not it will help you with permanent residence. But you know, if you get in and you get a study permit, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do it. Okay, so this study permit expires May 13th and in this year, and they finished their studies in April of this year. Should they apply for a study permit extension?
So as long as you can apply for your postgrad work permit after you've completed your course requirements and before your study permit expires, if there's enough time between when you finish your studies and your study permit expires in that window, you are fine. You can apply using the study permit you have. But if you need more time than that, or for whatever reason you can't make it, then you should apply for the study permit extension. Okay, so I was registered for a full-time semester. This person failed a course, which has a prerequisite course. So the college put them on part-time status without notification. And the time when they were made part-time, they missed the drop a course opportunity. And that was 1 month. They only had 1 month to complete the semester. So they basically
Sounds-
look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like it's something you should come for a consult. We can see if there's something we can try to explain as to what happened. There are no promises, but sometimes the officers can be sympathetic to your situation. It's also very important that while you're waiting for the work permit, that you think about options as well, just in case. Yeah. Okay, so this person, I think we already talked about this one. In light of new immigration rules, are students who finished in September 2024 who finished a course in a college still eligible for postgrad work permits?
So for the new regulations, it's my understanding they haven't changed the eligibility for postgrad work permit for college graduates at this time. There may be changes that do come. However, we don't have any information suggesting that they're going to remove postgrad work permits for those graduates.
Yeah, they did talk about these private-public cooperations where they were going to end the postgrad work permits if you were doing like a private-public program where you attend school in a private college, but you get the public college degree. But anybody who is registered in that program prior to September of this year, when you graduate, you are eligible for the postgrad work permit.
So this person's wondering how they can continue working in the same place after receiving a notification letter from Mohawk.
So if you've received your letter of completion from school and you apply for your postgrad work permit, then you can start working right away. This person asks if they're a part-time student twice, that they would jeopardize their chances for a postgrad work permit.
So Elizabeth went over this just a couple of questions ago. So it really depends on the situation. Most of the time that's going to be a problem for the postgrad work permit. But again, you want to come for a consult so we can talk about the specifics of your situation to see what can be done in your case. Okay, so this person's wondering if they extend their study permit to take a second program, can they work while the extension is under review by IRCC?
So it depends on when. So if you are attending a school and you're still studying, then that's fine. You can work under the conditions of the previous study permit. It just depends on your situation. If you're no longer attending school, but basically while you're on implied status, you're at the same situation as if you hold a study permit for the most part. The only thing is that when you're applying for your postgrad work permit, you need to have a valid study permit to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit. If you don't have a valid study permit, you cannot work while waiting for your postgrad work permit until your new, study permit comes. Okay.
Okay, next one.
For construction-based job, what is the NOC or tier number?
So this is one where we would have to know what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to be able to tell what your actual NOC or tier number would be. Okay, how will we receive the meeting recording and slides?
So we have all of your emails if you registered. So we will be sending you guys an email about that. By the way, feel free, we'll register you. Feel free to unsubscribe if you want to. But we normally just have everyone who registers go on our newsfeed. So sometimes, there are some new laws that will come out that will really affect a lot of our clients. So we will send out a news blast for you guys. It's not a way to advertise, it's just a way for us to get that news to you guys. Because once you leave here, the only way that we can let you know about some important news is through that way. So we'll send that to you. But if you don't like it, just unsubscribe. Okay. All right. What is the Federal Skilled Worker Program? I think
Okay,
we
so
already discussed that.
yeah, we did. Yeah, I think we've
Yeah.
covered that
Watch
in
the
this.
video again. We discussed that. Yeah. This program is hybrid. Person's
Mhm.
program is hybrid, which means that 50% of his classes are virtual. Before choosing it, they were told that qualify for postgrad work permit. So I'll have to double check. I think it's 50%.
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on when you started the program because these rules have been shifting for the last couple of years through COVID. So we would need to know a little bit more about your program, how the hours are calculated, when you started, all of that to be able to answer this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so this person was moved to part-time status. They didn't know. They figured it out from Google, and then they stopped working for 2 weeks to finish the semester, and then entered the current semester, it looks like, as a full-time student. So they're wondering if they're not eligible to apply for post-grad work permit, what can they do to become eligible? And are there any tier jobs for business students to pursue PR in Ontario or other provinces under a PNP?
This looks a consult, very, very much something you need to come for a consult. If you had changed the program, you might be able to, get the postgrad work permit for the new program that you studied. We'll have to take a look at your options. So this one wanted to change their program, and they to something that is more construction based. They want to know if they are allowed to change programs from an immigration point of view. It's different from an immigration point of view compared to what the school allows, because the schools have prerequisites and etc. But from an immigration point of view, are they allowed to change programs?
Yep, so you can change programs from an immigration point of view, that's fine. You're allowed to change programs. Okay, they're asking for the OINP Express Entry Stream link.
So if you Google OINP, you can go to the government website, but just know that you can't apply directly for the Express Entry stream, okay? You can be in the Express Entry and only if the government likes you. It's kind of like, on, what's it called? A Bumble? You know how like the men can't contact the women, only the women can contact the men? That's like this, okay? You guys are like the men. The government is like the women, okay? They can only if they swipe right on you, then they'll give you a notification. Can you then apply for the program? If they don't swipe right on you, if they don't like you, you stay in the pool, you cannot contact them. Okay. All right. When I was in part-time status on my 3rd semester, I begged the college to leave. They said no to me. And then I don't want to pass the semester. Something about the profile. You know what? I think this one is another. We have a lot of part-time situations. This is quite concerning. Come and talk to us, I think, for this part-time situation. Okay. How do they register pools for express entry or provincial nominee programs? And they want to be registered in all the provincial pools at once.
It's a great question. Yeah. So for express entry, there's the express entry online portal that you'll make. So you put in all of your information through their online application. And then for certain express entry streams, you're going to be considered if you're in the express entry pool. So for example, those express entry OINP ones we talked about. And then other provincial nomination programs, so like the OINP expression of interest streams that we talked about, you have to register through the Ontario portal. So it's another online application that you fill out through the Ontario website, and then that's how you register for those streams.
And, it's not, most of the provincial nomination streams that are not express entry based or even express entry based, they do require that you have job offers. Ontario is one of the few ones that don't, but a lot of the other provinces, they do. So one of the issues is if someone is applying for different provinces, that can be a huge issue because for provincial nominee programs, one of the key criteria is that you intend to live in that province. So if you're applying for two different provinces, how can you intend to live in two different provinces? You're lying to one of them. So it's very important not just to, get everything that you can. I know there's a temptation to do everything that you can. You have to be very strategic on how you're applying for different programs. Okay. This person is asking when is the best time to apply for postgrad. Review the video. We talked about that previously. Links in the chat that are shown in the presentation. We didn't put any links in the chat. You can oh, sorry. We'll send you the presentations. You can click on those links. How will one start up on OIMP? Not, I think we just did that. How to set up appointment. Please email us at inquiries@lmlawgroup.com as shown on the slide. It's not a free one. It costs $100, but that's a discounted rate for you guys. So let us know that you come to the webinar. Mary, is there any advantage or disadvantage of having a co-op in the third semester instead of last semester?
Not necessarily, as long as you're a full-time student the whole time, that's fine. Okay, this person is, their study permit is expiring in April. They've applied for an extension and their studies will complete in April. Can they apply for the postgrad work permit if they don't get a decision on their study permit extension by then?
So if your study permit is expiring in April, you already applied, you can apply for your postgrad work permit, but you can't work until your new study permit is issued. Okay. How many hours can I work as a full-time international student right now?
So this one we've talked about a little bit already, but there's a public policy that allows people to work 40 hours off campus right now. And then you can work full-time on campus. Yeah, those are the rules at the moment.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this now as well.
Yeah.
This one. We talked about that as well. Okay. This one just has a lot of facts that are very specific about enrolled in HVAC and eligible study permit. You guys, you really need to come for a consultation so that we can discuss your situation.
When we apply for postgrad work permit, do our partners get an extension in their open work permit?
Yes. So here's the thing. In order for your partners to get the extension on their work permits, you have to have a job. It doesn't have to be a high school job anymore, but it should be a job. If you don't have a job, you can apply, but it will be denied if by the time the officer gets to the application, you don't have a job. Okay. One of the things that you have to understand is that your partners, their work permits have an expiry date on that. And that is essentially when their work permit expires. It's different from your student status. Your student status ends 90 days after you finish your program. But let's say you have a study permit that is valid until end of this year, for example, December 31st, and their work permit ends December 31st. But let's say you complete your program on April 30th. Okay, so your status, you have to apply for your postgrad work permit within 90 days of you finishing your program before July. But that doesn't mean that your spouse has to apply for their work permit extension. Their work permit is good until the end of this year. They can apply for their work permit afterwards. And hopefully by that time, you will have your job. Okay?
Okay, the chat, okay. Can I take a break for more than 150 days when pregnant and after delivery?
You can certainly take a break, but if it goes beyond the 150 days, it's no longer authorized leave, even if you have leave from the school. At that time, you may want to file a visitor extension, or you may want to file a study permit extension, so that you can, and let them know, so that you can start in the new start date. Maybe if you need to take 2 semesters off, you may want to then file a study permit extension so that you can get a new study permit when your new program starts.
Okay, this one, I think we already answered that next one. Okay. So can we apply for the post-grad work permit with one of the documents required and then submit the rest of the college documents once we have them?
Here's the thing. When you apply for the application, if the officer gets to your application and does not see that you have all the documents, then they will reject your application. If you file it and you don't, let's say you don't have a passport that has already been extended, but later on you let them know that you have a passport and you file a web form, you update your application. If the officer sees it, then they might issue it. But if they don't see it, then you run the risk that your application can be denied. I can apply for a postgrad worker right after the transcripts are released from college, right?
So again, you need to just make sure that you're going to meet the requirements of the post-grad work permit application when the officer assesses your application. So transcripts, letter of completion from the college, those are going to be key documents to include in the application when you submit it. Okay, just showing how your living expenses like rent payment and other matters, others matter while applying for a post-grad work permit and PR.
No, they don't really care about your living expenses. Especially for the postgrad work permit, you don't need to show you have money for the postgrad work permit. For permanent residence, it depends on the type of applications. Some applications require you to show savings to meet LICO, others don't. It really depends on the type of application.
Any scope for tourism students?
Not sure what that means, tourism students. You don't need a study permit if your program is less than 6 months. But without a study permit, you don't get access to things like being able to work while you're studying, and being able to get a postgrad work permit. So there are some big advantages to being able to get a study permit.
Can we apply for the postgrad work permit?
We just answered that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am sorry. Yeah.
I'm a student and working as a general accountant full-time. I just want to know what if my student experience would count.
So it depends really on the application. It depends on which application to do. One thing to note is if you are not a CPA, you won't be counted for your occupation as an accountant. It will likely be a bookkeeper because one of the requirements for an accountant is that you have a CPA. All right, we are pretty much done. You know, we answered 47 questions. We still have 82 in the roster, but I think thank you guys so much for all your questions. That's great.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for attending, everyone. And as always, Elizabeth and Mary, you guys shared really useful information for a lot of our students. So thank you for that. And I imagine the recording will be very helpful as well. So look out for that. And thank you for taking the time to answer so many questions. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, they're almost at 50 questions. So that's great. Thank you for doing that.
All right. Thank you so much. All the best, guys. Take care.
Awesome. Take care. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.